Good morning. Friday, April 24th. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm getting ready to go to bed, but I had a good night last night and I wanted to talk about it. Good is a relative term. It's good for an ICU nurse. I had my same patient back that I had had the previous couple nights. They were doing pretty well. Had been making good improvements over the past few days. So it's nice to see improvement and get to be there along the steps of the way. So that's really cool. Last night was a little bit more of an up and down. There were issues with blood sugars. There were issues with blood pressure. There were issues with the patient becoming agitated and fighting against the breathing tube, which is pretty dangerous. That breathing tube is in place because the patient can't breathe on their own. So if it comes dislodged, it can prevent them from being able to breathe, but also cause damage to the airway so that it would be difficult to re-intubate. So it's kind of a balancing act because you want to keep them sedated enough that they are not fighting against the tube, but not so deeply sedated that you can't reverse it and they're not healing. Because if they're too deeply sedated, then there's nothing going on physiologically and it's not good. And you don't want to repress or suppress the respiratory drive, because really these patients' bodies need to be able to heal themselves and there's only so much medicine can do. So that kept me busy, made the night go by a lot faster. Also, we had a couple of critical situations. We proned a patient at the very beginning of the shift. It's a kind of a big effort. They're doing it so often now that they've got it down pretty much to a science. So there's at least 6 people in the room plus somebody at the head of the bed, which is either a respiratory therapist, anesthesiologist, or in our case, it was the attending physician. So, and they're there strictly to protect the airway and they guide the whole operation. So it's a whole lot of people and coordinating. And once things happen, it happens very quickly. So they proned this patient, and about an hour in, the patient started to look like they were not doing so well, like they may code soon. And there are ways to code a proned patient, I learned, but they're not ideal. So immediately we had to go in and unprone them, which again is 6 to 8 people. It's making sure none of the lines get crossed, making sure nothing gets pulled out, making sure, of course, the tube is secured. And it's also a high stress situation where everyone's kind of moving too fast and getting in each other's way. And it was remarkably well done. Everyone goes in and everyone has their spot and their job to do, and we just do it. So we got the patient turned over and were able to medically manage them before it got any worse. So that was good. That was, scary for a minute, but nice to see that the quick action on the part of everyone was able to help this person. They're still very, very sick. It's not like helping to cure them or anything, but at least help to avoid an imminent situation. We also had another patient who had previously been doing really well and over the past few nights had been declining rapidly to the point that everyone kind of knew death was impending, but everyone was still working very hard to keep it at bay. So the patient was on CVVH, which is a continuous dialysis, which cleans the blood because the kidneys aren't working, one of the major complications of this disease. But in patients that can't handle dialysis treatments, they use CVVH or CRRT, continuous renal replacement therapy, because with normal dialysis, you're flooding the body with fluid and then pulling fluid from the body, and it can be dangerous for people that can't handle the fluid shifts. So they use this CRRT as a slower process, and it filters the blood continuously. Usually by the time someone's on it, they're not doing so well. It means their kidneys are not functioning well. It means their heart and lungs are most likely not functioning well. Their blood pressure's not doing well. So it's a last-ditch effort to try to keep the patient well enough so that they can start to heal. So the patient was having several issues. It wasn't my patient, so I don't even know all the details, but they were having issues with clotting, again, a known complication of the coronavirus, and continued with issues throughout the night that got to a point where we knew that the patient was not going to recover. So family was contacted and the patient was made a DNR. And while we still, even after a patient's DNR, we are still working as hard as we can to keep them going. And if we can help them improve, that's always still the goal. People get a little bit confused and scared to make their patient or their family or loved one DNR because they think that means do not treat, and it doesn't. We treat a patient up until their death, unless there are certain cases where they're comfort care, but that's a different situation than a DNR. So this patient was being treated aggressively with medication and with treatments to try to get them better, but it just got to a point where we knew that that wasn't going to happen. So at that point, treatment shifts from treating the patient, trying to get them better, to just making them comfort in what's most likely the last minutes, hours of their life. So again, doesn't happen until there's nothing more that can be done. But this patient was lucky enough to have a wonderful nurse who set aside everything else she had to do and sat by his bedside until he passed. And I was super, super impressed by that, because it's something that we always try to do if there can't be family nearby. But in these situations, I wasn't sure how it would happen, because, and most times with these COVID patients, we don't want to be in the room any more than we have to, just for the risk of exposing ourselves and others. The longer you're in contact with someone with the disease, the more likely you are to develop it. So as much as we can protect ourselves, anytime we're in close proximity to a patient that's actively infected, we are risking not only ourselves, but whatever patient we might see next. So we do try to limit exposure. But his nurse was fortunate enough to be able to sit with him. And I know it gave me a lot of comfort to know that he wasn't alone, even though I didn't know him, had never had him, didn't really know anything about him. But I hope that families can be comforted by the fact that we are doing everything in our power to make these patients feel less alone when they really are completely alone. So that was really my first experience with a COVID death. And it was a good one as far as experiencing death goes. I think it gave me a good perspective, and I hope that that's the way most of these patients that do end up passing, that they get that same comfort and dignity. So now I'm going to bed. Sorry the video's a little choppy. I was trying really hard to keep it together and to make sure I wasn't saying anything that was, you know, too much information. So I'm gonna try to learn to edit better, but no promises. Good night.